I stood outside my son's door, with everything Uncle Clyde left me under my arm. Through the window, Marcus always left cracked. I heard them planning. Pine Grove, the home, guardianship papers. Get him declared incompetent. The manila folder from Tulsa, pressed against my ribs. The oil wells, the ranch. $12 million. My son Marcus spoke. His voice carried the certainty of a man signing off on demolition. Sign the papers, or he goes to Pine Grove. If you're enjoying this, please subscribe and comment what time it is where you are. Your support means everything. 42 years. That's how long I spent building things that mattered. That first day at Thompson Aerospace, summer of 1982, I was 17 with grease under my fingernails and a high school diploma still warm from the printer. The foreman, a man named Dutch Hendricks, who'd lost 2 fingers to a lathe in Korea, handed me a micrometer and told me to measure a piece of scrap aluminum. I measured it to 4 decimal places. Dutch looked at the reading, then looked at me. Most kids your age can't read past 2 decimals. My father taught me. He'd been a tool and die man before the bottle took him. Dutch nodded once. That got me the job. For 42 years, I worked in that building. Started as an apprentice sweeping metal shavings off the floor. Ended as senior toolmaker crafting components for jet engines and satellites. The work demanded accuracy measured in 10,000ths of an inch. But tolerance, off by half a human hair, could mean a turbine blade failing at 30,000 feet. I never lost a part to tolerance failure. Not once in 4 decades. Dorothy and I married the year I made journeyman. She was 19, working as a bookkeeper at a lumberyard, tracking every board, foot, and penny with the same careful attention she'd later bring to our household. We had 340 between us on our wedding day. Our reception was ham sandwiches in her mother's backyard. Those first years, we ate beans and rice 3 nights a week. Dorothy kept a ledger tracking every expense, her neat handwriting filling columns with numbers that always came up short. We saved $11 our first month together. She circled it in red ink like it was a victory. It was. Marcus came along in 1984. I held him in the delivery room, this red-faced screaming thing that fit in my 2 hands, and I made him a promise I never spoke aloud. He would have more than I did. He would have everything Dorothy and I could give him. We gave him everything. When Marcus was 14, Dorothy showed me a brochure for Westfield Academy. Private school. College prep. Tuition that made my chest tight. The public school is fine. I set down my coffee. Dorothy's eyes met mine across the kitchen table. The public school is adequate, she said. Westfield opens doors. The tuition was more than I made in 3 months. I took every overtime shift Thompson offered. Doubles became my routine. I'd leave the house at 5 in the morning, kiss Dorothy while she slept, and return after Marcus was already in bed. 6 years of this. 6 years of fluorescent light and metal dust and the constant hum of machinery. I missed his baseball games. The one where he hit the winning double against Riverside. The one where he struck out 3 times and cried in the parking lot afterward. Dorothy told me about them in the 20 minutes between my arriving home and falling asleep in my recliner. Vacations became a foreign concept. Other families at Thompson talked about beach trips and mountain cabins. I nodded along and kept my mouth shut. Dorothy worried. She'd catch me rubbing my lower back at the kitchen sink, watch me wince when I stood too fast. You're going to work yourself into the grave. Her voice carried the particular weight of a woman who'd been holding her tongue for months. I'm giving him a future. What about your future, Earl? What about ours? I didn't have an answer. I just had the next shift. Marcus graduated from Westfield in 2002. We paid $120,000 over those 6 years. Cash. No loans. Every dollar earned and saved and sacrificed. College came next. State University, business degree. Another 4 years. Another $120,000. Dorothy tracked every payment in her ledger. The same careful handwriting she'd used since we were newlyweds, counting our first $11. I stood at his graduation ceremony, watching him walk across the stage in his cap and gown. This young man we poured everything into. 6 months later, he was still living in our spare bedroom, sending out resumes that went nowhere, playing video games until 2 in the morning. I found him a job at Thompson through a friend in purchasing. Entry level. Good benefits. Room to grow. He lasted 8 months before quitting. Said the work was boring. That Christmas, Marcus announced he'd found a position as an insurance adjuster. Decent salary. He needed a car to get there. Dorothy and I bought him a Honda Civic. We called it a graduation gift, 2 years late. When Marcus wanted to buy his first house, I used $40,000 from my retirement account for the down payment. We called it a loan. Dorothy wrote it in her ledger, but we both knew those numbers would never balance. Then came my son's future wife. I met her at their engagement dinner in 2016. Tiffany had blonde hair pulled tight, lips that smiled without warming her eyes, and a handshake that lasted exactly 1 second too short. "You must be Earl." She pronounced my name like it tasted of something unpleasant. "Welcome to the family." She looked past me to the restaurant's wine list. They married that spring. The wedding cost more than Dorothy and I spent on our first 3 years of marriage combined. Marcus asked if we could help with the reception costs. We gave them $15,000, another loan that existed only in Dorothy's ledger. 2 years later, Marcus needed a bigger house. The starter home wasn't enough. Tiffany had found a place in Meadow Ridge, a subdivision where the lawns were measured in fractions of an acre and the neighbors drove German cars. The mortgage was more than Marcus qualified for a loan. He needed a co-signer. "Earl." Dorothy's voice was quiet that night. "If we sign this and he defaults, we lose our house." "He won't default. He's our son." Dorothy looked at me with 40 years of marriage in her eyes. She didn't argue. She signed beside me. Through all of this, my workshop kept me sane. The garage at our ranch house held a 10 by 12 space where I built puzzle boxes. I'd started making them in my 30s, small wooden mechanisms with hidden compartments and sequential locks. Each one took months. The joinery demanded the same accuracy as my aerospace work. Dovetails cut to tolerances measured in thousandths of an inch. The boxes weren't just carpentry. They were logic problems, rendered in wood and brass. To open the most complex one I ever built, you had to solve a sequence of 17 steps in exact order. Slide panels in the right direction. Press hidden pins. Rotate sections that seemed fixed until you understood the mechanism. Dorothy called them my meditation. For our 25th anniversary, I gave her one. 3 years of work compressed into 8 inches of walnut and maple. The exterior looked simple, unassuming. Inside were 12 compartments, each requiring a different sequence to access. The deepest chamber, the one that took 42 moves to reach, was where Dorothy kept her most precious letters. Family correspondence she never shared with me, including notes from relatives I barely knew. But sometimes I'd see her sitting at the kitchen table, the box open to its final secret, reading pages I couldn't see with tears tracking down her cheeks. I never asked. Some privacy matters more than curiosity. That box now sits on an overturned milk crate in a converted garage. The only thing I have left from the life Dorothy and I built. The cancer came in January. Pancreatic. Stage 4. The doctor used words like aggressive and palliative and quality of remaining time. Dorothy held my hand while he spoke, and I realized she was steadying me, not the other way around. She'd known something was wrong for months. The weight loss she blamed on a diet. The fatigue she called getting older. She'd hidden it because someone had to be strong. By May, she was gone. I held her hand in the hospice room, watching machines beep their steady rhythm while the numbers meant nothing anymore. Her breathing came shallow and wet. The sun set outside her window, painting the room orange and red, and I thought about ham sandwiches in her mother's backyard. Beans and rice. $11 circled in red ink. Marcus sat in the hallway. I could see him through the open door, scrolling through his phone, occasionally checking his watch. His mother was dying 50 feet away, and he was reading about productivity optimization. Dorothy's eyes found mine in the last hour. Tell Marcus. Her voice was barely there. Tell him what? Her hand squeezed mine, weak but specific. Tell him I forgive him. Then she was gone. 3 weeks after the funeral, Marcus appeared at the ranch house with papers and a proposal. Dad, you shouldn't be alone. The concern in his voice was polished like a sales pitch. We've got a guest suite at our place. Plenty of room. You could sell this house, get out from under the mortgage, start fresh. The mortgage was paid off. Dorothy and I had made the final payment 6 years earlier. I mentioned this. Marcus's face flickered, something passing behind his eyes before his expression reset. Still, a big house for one person. The upkeep, the yard work. Wouldn't it be nice to not worry about all that? I was drowning in grief. The house smelled like Dorothy everywhere I turned. Her chair sat empty at the kitchen table. Her clothes still hung in our closet. The puzzle box, with its hidden letters, waited on her nightstand, and I couldn't bring myself to open it. I agreed. The house sold for $280,000. I signed papers in a haze of loss, Dorothy's absence making everything feel distant and unreal. Marcus handled the details, said he was helping, said I shouldn't worry. When the closing finished, $47,000 remained. The reverse mortgage came first. Marcus had convinced us to take it 2 years earlier, called it smart financial planning, said it would give us flexibility. I barely remembered signing those papers either. The equity we'd built over 30 years, gone. Then there was a home equity loan, $60,000. My signature on the bottom, though the handwriting looked wrong. Too careful, too deliberate. When I asked Marcus about it, he showed me the papers with patient concern. You signed it, Dad. Right here. See, but I didn't remember. And the signature, my signature, that had stayed consistent for 50 years, looked like someone had studied it and tried too hard. I stopped asking questions. Marcus had an answer for everything, and each answer made me feel older, more confused, more like the burden he was already calling me. The $47,000 went to Marcus as a loan for temporary cash flow issues. The issues never resolved. The loan was never mentioned again. And the guest suite. I walked into an unfinished garage with exposed wooden studs and a concrete floor stained with decades of motor oil. A single bare bulb hung from the ceiling, casting shadows that made the space feel smaller than its 400 square feet. Marcus stood behind me, his voice bright with forced enthusiasm. We'll get it fixed up. Some drywall, maybe carpet. It'll be comfortable. That was 8 months ago. The studs are still exposed. The concrete still stains my socks when I walk to the bathroom in the main house at 3 in the morning. The carpet never came. What came instead was a folding army cot with a thin mattress, the kind I slept on in my first apartment before Dorothy and I pooled our 340 and started our life together. A mini fridge in the corner holds milk that expires before I can drink it, and leftovers scraped from plates before they reach the garbage. The space heater sits in the corner, 20 years old, cord frayed where it meets the plug. Marcus promised to replace it 3 winters ago. The thermostat sticks at whatever temperature it chooses. On January nights, when the temperature drops below freezing, I sleep in 4 layers and keep my feet off the concrete. Tiffany brought me soup once. Chicken noodle from a can, barely warm in a chipped bowl. Don't get used to it. She set it on my milk crate nightstand. This isn't a nursing home. The word hung there between us. Nursing home. A threat wearing a joke's clothing. I ate the soup and said nothing. But there's a workshop corner where I still build puzzle boxes. The tools came with me from the ranch house, the only negotiation I won. The current project has been in progress for 6 months. A birthday gift for my granddaughter Lily. 23 hidden compartments. A mechanism that will take her years to master. Lily visits me in secret. She's 8 years old, quiet and watchful in ways her parents refuse to notice. While Marcus scrolls through his phone and Tiffany schedules activities that exhaust a child into submission, Lily slips through the side door into my garage. She sits on the concrete floor, legs crossed, watching me work. "Grandpa, why do you cut so slowly?" "Because accuracy takes patience. You can't rush a tolerance." "What's a tolerance?" I show her the puzzle box joint, how the pieces must fit exactly, how a gap, the width of a hair, would ruin the mechanism. Her eyes widen. "That's so small." That's the point. Tiffany discovered these visits 2 weeks ago. She stood in the doorway of my garage, arms crossed, watching her daughter ask me about dovetail joints. "Lily," the word sharp as cut glass. "What did I tell you about coming out here?" Lily's face fell. She looked at me, then at her mother, caught between. "I was just learning about woodworking." Tiffany's lip curled. "You have piano practice. Your grandfather doesn't know anything about the skills you actually need." She led Lily away without looking at me. Since then, my granddaughter visits less often, and only when both her parents are occupied. But she still comes. Yesterday, she found me fitting brass hinges into her birthday box, the mechanism half assembled on my workbench. "Grandpa." Her whisper came from the doorway. "Can I watch?" I nodded, and she crept inside, settling onto the overturned paint bucket that serves as her seat. "Mom says you're confused, that your brain doesn't work right anymore." I looked at my granddaughter, this quiet child who was the only person in my son's house who saw me as human. "Do I seem confused to you?" She studied the puzzle box, the intricate mechanism, the joints cut to thousandths of an inch. "No," she spoke slowly. "You seem like you know exactly what you're doing." "I do." "Then why does Mom say those things?" I didn't have an answer that wouldn't poison a child against her parents. Dorothy would have known what to say. She always did. Sometimes people see what they want to see, not what's really there. She thought about this while I worked. "I see you, Grandpa. I know you do." Dorothy's recipe box sits on my milk crate nightstand, the only possession from my former life that matters. The wooden box is weathered now, paint faded, corners softened by decades of handling. Inside are index cards covered in her neat handwriting, each one spotted and stained from use. I haven't opened it since she died. Can't bring myself to see her recipes written in a hand that will never write again. But the box has secrets. A hidden compartment I built into the false bottom for our 25th anniversary. I know Dorothy kept something in there. Letters she never showed me, documents she thought might matter someday. She always was the smart one. Dorothy taught me patience. 40 years of marriage, and the lesson I learned best was that some things can't be rushed. You endure. You wait. You trust that the tolerance will hold. But here's what Dorothy never told me. Patience has limits. A breaking point that builds in silence, invisible until the moment it fractures. Metal fatigue, machinists call it. Stress, corrosion, cracking. The load accumulates below the surface, undetectable, until suddenly the part that seems solid gives way. I'm 64 years old. I've given everything to a son who sees me as a burden to be managed. I've lost my wife, my home, my savings, my dignity. I sleep in a garage, and eat scraps and build puzzle boxes that prove my mind still works. No one cares. But last night, standing outside Marcus's window with $12 million under my arm, I heard my son planning to dispose of me like broken equipment. Something inside me reached its limit. The tolerance held for 42 years. Now it's time to see what happens when it breaks. The disrespect didn't start with words like senile or burden. It started with silences. Conversations that stopped when I entered the room. The sudden shift in tone, the way Marcus would glance at Tiffany and she would glance back, and whatever they'd been discussing would evaporate into small talk about the weather or Lily's piano practice. I noticed. A man who spent 40 years measuring tolerances in 10,000ths of an inch notices when something's off by a fraction. The first time it happened, I told myself I was imagining things. The second time, I thought maybe they needed privacy. By the third time, I understood. They were discussing me, planning something, and whatever it was, they didn't want me to hear. Phase 1. I became invisible. Family dinners became a study in erasure. My chair faced the wall, not the window with its view of the backyard, not the kitchen where I could see the meal being prepared. The wall, cream-colored drywall with a single framed photograph of Marcus's college graduation hanging at eye level. I stared at that photograph through 17 dinners before I stopped counting. Tiffany spoke about me in third person while I sat 3 feet away. She addressed Marcus as if I were furniture, or worse, as if I were a problem to be managed rather than a person to be acknowledged. Does he need to eat with us? Her nose wrinkled. The smell from that garage. I'd showered that morning, used the guest bathroom at 5 a.m. before anyone was awake, the way I'd learned to do after Tiffany complained about finding my toiletries near her skincare products. Marcus shrugged. His eyes stayed on his phone, thumb scrolling, earbuds in, some productivity podcast playing at a volume I could hear from across the table. Optimize your environment, the podcast host said. Remove friction from your daily routine. Marcus nodded along, like he was receiving wisdom from a prophet. I ate my meatloaf and said nothing. Thanksgiving came 6 weeks after I moved into the garage. Dorothy had been gone 6 months. The wound was still fresh, still raw, still bleeding in ways that made me wake at 3 a.m., reaching for her side of the bed that wasn't there anymore. I assumed I'd eat with the family. It was Thanksgiving. Dorothy and I had hosted for 30 years. Her turkey and my gravy and the cranberry sauce she made from scratch, because the canned stuff was an abomination against God and country. Marcus found me in the garage at noon, already dressed in the one good shirt I'd kept. Dad. He stood in the doorway, not entering. We've got some relatives coming over. Tiffany's parents. A few cousins. I nodded. Should I set up extra chairs in the dining room? His face did something complicated. A series of micro-expressions I'd learned to read over the months of careful observation. Actually, he rubbed the back of his neck. It might be better if you ate out here. Just for today. I didn't understand. Out here? Dad gets confused with too many people. He said it like he was explaining something to a child. We don't want to overwhelm you. I wasn't confused. I wasn't overwhelmed. I was his father, and he was telling me to eat Thanksgiving dinner alone in a converted garage while his wife's family gathered 50 feet away. I ate a turkey sandwich from the mini fridge while I listened to laughter through the walls. Christmas was the same. Easter. The 4th of July. Every holiday that should have meant family became another day of exclusion, another meal eaten alone, another lie told to relatives who asked why Earl wasn't joining them. Dad gets confused. Dad needs his rest. Dad's not feeling well. I was feeling fine. I was thinking clearly. I was watching my son build a narrative that had nothing to do with reality and everything to do with what he needed people to believe. I'd counted 420 days since the hospice room. Then the vocabulary shifted. Confused became forgetful. Forgetful became having Episodes. Episodes suggested something medical, something serious, something that required professional intervention. I heard Tiffany on the phone with her mother one afternoon, her voice carrying through the thin garage wall. "It's gotten worse." She sighed, the sound of a woman bearing a burden. Early dementia, the doctors think. He repeats himself constantly. Forgets where he is. "We're doing our best, but honestly, I don't know how much longer we can manage." No doctor had examined me. No diagnosis had been made. But Tiffany's lie spread through Meadow Ridge like gospel truth, passed from neighbor to neighbor, from church pew to grocery store aisle. Poor Earl. Mrs. Henderson from 2 doors down stopped me at the mailbox one morning. Her voice dropped to the sympathetic register people use for the dying. "Marcus and Tiffany are saints for taking care of you." "I'm fine, Mrs. Henderson." She patted my arm. The gesture said she didn't believe me. The gesture said she'd already decided what I was. "Of course you are, dear. Of course you are." Phase 3 started small. A request here, a favor there. The requests always came through Marcus, always framed as emergencies, always accompanied by urgency laced with guilt that made refusing impossible. "Dad, Lily needs gymnastics equipment. The bill's $500 and things are tight this month. Dad, the HOA hit us with a special assessment. $800. You know how these neighborhood associations are." "Dad," Tiffany's car broke down. "The mechanic says $2,000 for the transmission." I gave until my Social Security check was consumed before it arrived. I gave until my savings account, the hidden one Marcus didn't know about, dropped below $3,000. I gave until I started skipping meals, telling myself I wasn't hungry when my stomach growled at midnight. The container held half a serving of lasagna, edges dried from reheating. Tuesday's dinner, now Thursday's. Food deemed unfit for even the garbage of the main house found its way to my corner of the garage. Tiffany would appear with a container, set it on my milk crate nightstand, and leave without meeting my eyes. "Don't get used to it." She said it once, the one time she brought me soup. "This isn't a nursing home." The word hum in the cold air. Nursing home. Not a statement. A preview. Winter hit in December. The space heater's thermostat stuck at whatever temperature it chose, usually somewhere around 50 degrees. The garage had no insulation. Wind cut through the gaps in the walls, through the cracks around the side door, through the exposed studs that Marcus had promised to cover with drywall 18 months ago. One night, the temperature dropped to 34 degrees. I woke at 2 a.m., with my breath visible in the air, my toes so numb I couldn't feel them for 20 minutes. I pulled on thermal underwear beneath flannel pajamas, beneath a wool sweater, beneath the heaviest coat I owned. The concrete floor stole heat through my socks until I learned to keep my feet off it entirely. Marcus promised to fix the heater. 3 winters now. The promise meant nothing. The promises never meant anything. My granddaughter Lily became the only light in that darkness. She would slip through the side door after school, her footsteps soft on the concrete, her eyes bright with the excitement of a child doing something forbidden. "Grandpa." Her whisper carried warmth the space heater couldn't provide. "Can I watch you work?" She sat on the overturned paint bucket, legs crossed, chin propped on her hands. I carved puzzle box components, while she asked questions her parents never thought to ask. "Why do you cut so slowly?" Precision takes patience. You can't rush a tolerance. "What's a tolerance?" I showed her the joint I was fitting, 2 pieces of walnut that had to mate within thousandths of an inch. A gap the width of a hair would ruin the mechanism. "That's so small." Her eyes went wide. "That's the point." "Grandpa, why don't you eat dinner with us?" The question stopped my hands mid-cut. I looked at my granddaughter, this quiet, observant child who noticed things her parents refused to see. "Grandpa's happier out here." The lie tasted like ash. But what could I tell her? That her father called me confused? That her mother wanted me institutionalized? That the people who should love me were counting the days until they could dispose of me like broken equipment? She was 8 years old. Some truths were too heavy for children to carry. Tiffany discovered the visits on a Tuesday afternoon in October. She stood in the garage doorway, arms crossed, ice blue eyes tracking from Lily to me and back again. Her expression reminded me of the foreman at Thompson who found workers slacking. Not anger, something colder. Lily, the word cut glass. What did I tell you about coming out here? My granddaughter's face fell. She looked at me, then at her mother, caught between. I was just learning about woodworking. Tiffany's lip curled. You have piano practice. Your grandfather doesn't know anything about the skills you actually need. She led Lily away without looking at me. Since then, the visits came less often. Lily slipped through the side door twice that month. Then once, then not at all for 3 weeks. But she still came. The last time, 3 days ago, she found me fitting brass hinges into her birthday box. She stood in the doorway, watching the mechanism take shape. Grandpa. Her whisper floated across the concrete. Can you teach me how the hinges work? I nodded, and she crept inside, settling onto the overturned paint bucket that served as her seat. I showed her how the brass pins aligned, how the leaves had to seat flush, how the slightest misalignment would bind the action. She studied the box for a long moment. Then she looked up at me. You're really good at this. 42 years of practice. She was quiet again, watching my hands work. Then she asked the question I'd been dreading. Mom says you're getting worse. That soon you won't remember who I am. I set down my tools and looked at my granddaughter. This quiet child enrolled in 4 activities she didn't choose, exhausted and scheduled into numbness, seeking refuge with the grandfather she was forbidden to see. I'll always remember you, Lily. Always. She smiled, small but real. I believe you. The forged loan surfaced in my memory like a splinter working its way out. 18 months ago, Marcus appeared at the ranch house with a manila folder. His smile was the brightness of a sun about to ask for something. Dad, I need you to sign some papers. Routine insurance stuff. Updates to the policy. Now that Mom's gone. I signed where Marcus pointed. Page 3, bottom. Page 7, middle. Page 12, the signature line highlighted in yellow. The home equity line of credit appeared on my bank statement 6 weeks later. $60,000 withdrawn against the house. Dorothy and I had paid off over 30 years. I confronted Marcus in the kitchen of the Meadow Ridge house. Tiffany was at the grocery store. Lily was at school. I'd chosen the timing on purpose. This loan. I set the bank statement on the counter. I didn't sign for a home equity loan. Marcus's face cycled through expressions I'd learned to recognize. Confusion first, eyebrows drawing together. Then concern, mouth softening into a sympathetic frown. Then patience, reserved for dealing with the elderly and the slow. His hands went to his pockets. His eyes slid left, toward the door, then back. Dad, you signed it. Right here. He pulled the document from a folder I hadn't seen him retrieve. See? The signature looked wrong. Too careful. Too deliberate. My hand had signed the same way for 50 years, the loops and lines flowing from muscle memory. This signature looked like someone had studied it, practiced it, tried too hard. I don't remember signing this. This is exactly what I mean, Dad. Marcus's voice dropped into the register of genuine concern. These episodes. The confusion. You signed it in my living room. You don't remember? I remembered signing insurance papers. I remembered yellow highlighter on signature lines. I didn't remember agreeing to borrow $60,000 against my home. But Marcus was already suggesting my memory was failing, already turning my legitimate question into evidence of the incompetence he was manufacturing. I stopped asking questions. I started keeping a journal. The puzzle box on my workbench has 17 hidden compartments, the most complex mechanism I've ever designed. To reach the deepest chamber requires solving a sequence of 42 moves in exact order. Slide panels in specific directions. Press hidden pins. Rotate sections that seem fixed until you understand the mechanism. The journal fits in that deepest chamber. Pages of dates, amounts, exact quotes, documentation of every slight, every theft, every lie told about my mental state. November 3rd, I wrote. Marcus requested $500 for Lily's gymnastics. Third request, this month. Social Security check, exhausted by the 15th. November 7th, Tiffany told Mrs. Henderson, I have early dementia. No doctor has examined me. No diagnosis exists. November 12th, space heater failed overnight. Temperature in garage dropped to 34 degrees. Marcus promised to fix it. Promise number 47 since moving in. November 18th, found original property deeds in Dorothy's recipe box. Hidden compartment in the false bottom. She must have suspected something. Dorothy's recipe box held more than recipes. The false bottom I'd built for our 25th anniversary contained copies of documents Marcus didn't know existed. Original property deeds from before the reverse mortgage. Bank statements showing the forged signature. A note in Dorothy's handwriting, for when you need proof. Love always, D. She'd known. Somehow, she'd known. Even dying, she was still protecting me. I watched Tiffany's reflection in the darkened television screen one evening, scrolling through Pine Grove's website, nodding to herself as she found exactly what she wanted. 40 miles outside town. 2-star rating. Documented staff shortages. She compiled evidence of my incompetence. My unfamiliarity with Marcus's smartphone, which I'd never been shown how to use. My wandering, which meant walking to the mailbox. My confusion, which meant asking why my bank balance kept dropping when money was being stolen from my accounts. She found Dr. Stephen Marsh. I overheard her on the phone with him, her voice low but not low enough. Just a brief evaluation. 15 minutes. Marcus says he owes you a favor from the insurance claim last year. We need documentation for the guardianship petition. Guardianship. The word settled into my chest like a cold stone. They were planning to have me declared incompetent, to take control of whatever they thought I had left, to put me in Pine Grove Care Center and forget I existed. Dorothy's voice whispered in my memory, her words from a lifetime of watching me work. You can't rush a tolerance. Work with what the material gives you. The material was giving me evidence. Dates and amounts and exact quotes, documented with the precision of a man who spent 40 years finding faults others couldn't see. The tolerance was holding, but something inside me was approaching its breaking point. A fracture, invisible on the surface, building stress with every stolen dollar and every whispered lie, and every cold night alone in a converted garage. I closed the puzzle box over my journal. 42 moves to seal it shut. 42 moves no one else could solve. Let them believe I was confused. Let them file their guardianship petition. Let them count my Social Security as their income and plan my institutional death. When the time came, they would learn what 42 years of precision work had taught me. The tolerance holds until it doesn't. And when it breaks, everything built on it comes down. The Tuesday before Thanksgiving began the same way every other day in that garage had begun for 8 months. Dawn came through the single window facing the neighbor's fence. Gray light, November light, the kind that promised nothing but cold. I pushed off the army cot, my back protesting the thin mattress that had worn through in the center. The concrete floor sent ice through my socks. I found the wool slippers Dorothy had given me 3 Christmases ago before the chill could settle into my bones. The space heater clicked and hummed in the corner. Its thermostat had stuck again overnight. The digital readout showed 50 degrees. I could see my breath in the air. Coffee. The hot plate sat on my workbench, the only reliable source of warmth in 400 square feet of unfinished garage. I filled the dented kettle from the mini-fridge's water pitcher and set it to boil. Instant coffee waited in a jar beside Dorothy's recipe box. 2 spoonfuls into a chipped mug. The routine of a man whose world had shrunk to the dimensions of a prison cell. Workshop, cot, mini-fridge. Window facing the neighbor's fence. This was my life now. But this Tuesday felt different. Through the thin wall separating my garage from the main house, I heard voices. Raised voices. Marcus and Tiffany in the kitchen, their words indistinct, but their tone sharp enough to cut. The percussion of heels on hardwood. Tiffany pacing. Something was brewing over there. I could feel it through the walls, like a change in air pressure before a storm. I poured hot water over the instant coffee and let it steep while I pulled on another layer. Flannel shirt over thermal underwear. The cold wouldn't break for hours yet. 3 days earlier, a letter had arrived. The envelope was forwarded from our old address, the ranch house Dorothy and I had paid off over 30 years. The house I'd sold for $280,000 that somehow became $47,000 after reverse mortgages and home equity loans. I barely remembered signing. The return address read Blackwood and Associates, Attorneys at Law, Tulsa, Oklahoma. Inside, a single page on heavy cream stationery. Regarding the estate of Clyde Dawson. We request your presence at our offices to discuss matters requiring immediate attention. Uncle Clyde. The wildcatter who'd struck oil in Oklahoma back in the 80s. The uncle I hadn't spoken to in 30 years, not since a family falling out over something so minor I could barely remember what it was. A disagreement at a funeral. Harsh words exchanged. Pride on both sides that calcified into decades of silence. I'd assumed he was dead. Apparently he was. The letter didn't say otherwise. I told no one about that envelope. Not Marcus. Not Tiffany. I called the number printed at the bottom, spoke to a secretary with a voice like warm honey, and scheduled an appointment for the following day. The emergency fund I'd already drawn from sat in Dorothy's recipe box, the false bottom I built for our 25th anniversary, the hidden compartment where she kept her most precious correspondence. I'd never looked at those letters. Some privacy mattered more than curiosity. I took what remained, $40. Dorothy's old Camry sat in the driveway where it had sat for 8 months. Marcus had wanted to sell it 3 times. 3 times I'd refused. It was the one negotiation I'd won since moving into this garage. The one piece of our former life that remained mine. The drive to Tulsa took 4 hours. I left before dawn, drove through the gray November morning, watched the Oklahoma landscape flatten and open as the highway stretched toward the city. My back ached by hour 2. By hour 3, I'd stopped twice to walk the stiffness out. The trip would exhaust me. But some things couldn't wait. Raymond Blackwood's office occupied the 2nd floor of a red brick building on Main Street. Old Tulsa money. The kind of building that had witnessed generations of oil deals and family secrets. The air inside smelled of leather conditioner and old paper. The scent of careful record-keeping. The receptionist, a woman in her 60s with silver hair and reading glasses on a beaded chain, led me to a corner office overlooking the Arkansas River. Raymond Blackwood rose from behind his desk. He was 68, silver-haired, with a slight Oklahoma drawl. His grip was firm. His eyes held mine a beat longer than necessary, reading me. Earl Dawson. Thank you for making the drive. Please, sit. He gestured to one of the leather chairs facing his desk. Can I get you some coffee? Water? I'm fine. He settled back into his chair and studied me for a long moment. Then he said words that made no sense at all. Your wife was a remarkable woman. I didn't move, didn't speak. The sentence hung in the air between us like smoke. Dorothy? Raymond nodded. He opened a drawer and withdrew a thick manila folder, setting it on the desk between us. She wrote to your Uncle Clyde for 20 years, Mr. Dawson. Did you know that? I didn't. The words came out rough. I had no idea. Raymond opened the folder. Inside were letters, dozens of them. Envelopes addressed in Dorothy's neat handwriting, postmarks spanning 2 decades. She started writing to him in 2004. He picked up the first envelope. I don't know what prompted it. Clyde never told me. But she wrote to him every few months, sometimes more often. She told him about your life, your work, your family. He handed me the envelope. I recognized Dorothy's handwriting immediately, the careful loops, the precise spacing, the same hand that had filled our household ledger for 40 years. Dear Clyde, the letter began, I hope this finds you well. I wanted you to know that Earl finished his 20th year at Thompson Aerospace this month. They gave him a plaque and a gift certificate to a steakhouse we'll probably never use. He's too proud to tell you himself, but I thought you should know. He built something for the Mars rover last year, a component so precise that the engineers said it couldn't be done. Earl proved them wrong in 3 days. I set the letter down. My hands were shaking. She sent photographs with most of them. Raymond produced a stack of photos from the folder. Earl at his workbench. Marcus's graduation. Lily's first steps. She documented your lives for a man you'd stopped speaking to decades ago. Why? Raymond leaned back. I asked Clyde the same question toward the end. He said Dorothy understood something about family that most people forget. That love doesn't require proximity. That forgiveness doesn't require forgetting. She kept him connected to a brother's family he thought he'd lost forever. I looked at the photographs. Dorothy had taken most of them. I remembered some of the moments. Marcus in his cap and gown. Lily taking her first wobbly steps across the living room. Me at my workbench, focused on some component I couldn't even recall now. Unaware my wife was preserving the moment for a man I'd written off as dead. There's one more letter. Raymond's voice was gentle. Her last one, dated 3 weeks before she passed. He handed it to me. Dear Clyde. Dorothy's handwriting was shakier now. The cancer was already taking her grip. I don't have much time left. The doctors say weeks, maybe days. I'm writing to ask you something I have no right to ask. Remember Earl when the time comes. He's going to need family, and I won't be there. The paper blurred. I blinked hard. Clyde remembered. Raymond's voice was soft but clear. He revised his will 2 weeks before he died. Left everything to you. I looked up. 3 producing oil wells. Raymond continued. ConocoPhillips lease, generating approximately $47,000 monthly in royalties. A 400-acre ranch in Osage County. Mineral rights extending 200 feet below the surface. He paused. Total estimated value, $12.4 million. The number didn't register. Couldn't register. I heard it, but my brain refused to process it. 12 million and change. Raymond almost smiled. Your uncle was a careful man. Lived modestly despite his wealth. Let it accumulate for decades, with no one to leave it to. Then Dorothy's letters reminded him what family meant. I sat in that leather chair, surrounded by decades of oil money and legal secrets, holding a letter from my dead wife, asking a man I'd forgotten to remember me. $12.4 million. More money than I'd earned in 42 years at Thompson Aerospace. More than I'd ever imagined existing in one place, attached to one name. My name. The trust includes certain provisions. Raymond's voice turned precise now. He withdrew another document from the folder. What kind of provisions? A spendthrift clause. Raymond traced the language with his finger. Prevents creditors or family members from accessing the funds directly. And the contestability period? Expired 6 months ago. Raymond looked up. You understand trust law? I understand contracts. I've read enough of them over the years. Raymond nodded. There's also specific language requiring the beneficiary to be of sound mind at the time of acceptance. Which brings me to my next point. I need to verify your competency. Not because I doubt it, but because the trust requires documentation. We talked for 2 hours. Raymond asked about my career at Thompson. I explained tolerance calculations, the mathematics of precision machining, the way a component measured in 10,000ths of an inch could mean the difference between a jet engine running smoothly and failing at 30,000 feet. He asked about Dorothy. I told him about our first apartment, the $340 we pooled to start our life, the ledger she kept for 40 years, tracking every penny we earned and spent. He asked about the puzzle boxes. I described the mechanisms, the sequential locks, the 17 hidden compartments in my current project that required solving 42 moves in exact order to access the deepest chamber. At the end, Raymond set down his pen and smiled. You're as sharp as anyone I've met in 40 years of practice, Earl. I'll document that thoroughly in the trust file. If anyone ever questions your competence, they'll have to go through my notes first. He handed me the manila folder. These are your copies. The trust documents, the royalty statements, Dorothy's letters, all of them. And this, a handwritten note, was paperclipped to the front of the folder. Shaky handwriting, an old man's script, for Earl. Dorothy never gave up on family. Neither did I. Clyde. The trust names an independent trustee. Raymond explained the final provision. Any transfer over $50,000 requires approval from someone who will actually verify your wishes. Not a family member. Not someone who could be pressured or bribed. A professional fiduciary who answers to the court. He paused. Your uncle anticipated exactly this situation. He knew families could turn ugly around money. He made sure no one could touch this but you. I drove home with the folder on the passenger seat. $12.4 million in paper. I kept glancing at it like it might vanish. 4 hours of highway. 4 hours of watching the Oklahoma landscape turn back into Missouri. 4 hours of thinking about Dorothy, about her 20 years of letters, about the connection she'd maintained with a man I'd forgotten existed. She'd known, even dying, she'd been protecting me, arranging for a future I couldn't see, building a safety net I didn't know I needed. The folder held $12.4 million in legal documents, but it also held something more valuable. Dorothy's final gift. Her love reaching across death to save me one more time. I planned to tell Marcus that evening. Not everything. I wasn't foolish, but enough. Enough to ease the tension, enough to show I could contribute to the household, enough to maybe, possibly, rebuild something of the relationship I'd once had with my son. I parked in the driveway at dusk. November cold settling over the subdivision. The lights were on in the main house. I could see shadows moving behind the kitchen curtains. I tucked the folder under my arm and walked toward the side door that led to my garage. That's when I heard them through the window. Marcus always left that window cracked for ventilation. A habit from summers when the garage got too hot. He'd never bothered to seal it for winter. Tiffany's voice came first. Sharp, certain, laying out a plan with the precision of someone who'd been preparing it for months. Dr. Marsh is ready to file the evaluation. We just need Earl to sign the financial power of attorney. I stopped walking, the folder pressed against my ribs. $12.4 million in my hands, and my daughter-in-law was talking about power of attorney. Marcus's voice came next. Hesitant, following. What if he won't sign? Then we file for emergency guardianship. Tiffany's words were clipped. The court date is set for December 3rd. Marcia's testimony plus the wandering incidents equals automatic approval. Court date. December 3rd, 14 days away. And Pine Grove? They have a bed available January 1st. $4,200 a month. Paid from his Social Security and whatever's left from Dorothy's estate. I stood frozen on the gravel path. The cold November air cut through my flannel shirt. My breath came in small white clouds that drifted toward the cracked window where my son and his wife planned my institutional death. The folder burned in my hands. $12.4 million. 3 oil wells. A ranch in Oklahoma. More money than they'd see in 10 lifetimes. And they were discussing how to lock me away in a 2-star nursing facility to steal my Social Security check. Marcus spoke again. The words that would echo through every remaining day of my life. Sign the papers or he goes to Pine Grove. Either way, we're done supporting a burden. Burden. The word hung in the November air. My hand tightened on the folder. My breath stopped. I stood outside my son's window for 90 seconds. I counted them, the way I'd counted every indignity, every stolen dollar, every lie told about my mental state. Something changed in those 90 seconds. Not anger. I'd felt anger for months, swallowed it like bitter medicine, told myself patience was strength and endurance was dignity. This was different, not in my chest, lower, in the gut where 42 years of swallowed pride had been waiting. A shift as precise and irreversible as metal fatigue reaching its fracture point. The tolerance had held through 42 years of sacrifice, through $240,000 in education costs, through down payments and co-signed mortgages and loans that were never repaid, through Dorothy's death and the garage and the space heater that never worked, and the leftovers scraped from plates before they reached the garbage. The tolerance had held. Now it shattered. I walked to my garage, closed the door quietly behind me, sat on my cot in the 50-degree cold with $12.4 million under my arm, and listened to my heartbeat steady and slow. Dorothy's recipe box sat on the overturned milk crate. I'd looked at it 100 times in this garage. Never opened it since her death. I opened it now. Beneath the recipes, beneath the hidden compartment where I'd taken the $40 for Tulsa, Dorothy had hidden more. Copies of the original property deeds, from before the reverse mortgage Marcus had convinced us to take. The business loan documents, the one with my forged signature. The $60,000 that vanished into credit card payments and Mercedes leases. And a note, Dorothy's handwriting on a torn piece of ledger paper. For when you need proof. Love always, D. I sat in the freezing garage until midnight. Didn't sleep, didn't eat. Just thought, with the systematic precision of a man who'd spent 40 years solving problems others said couldn't be solved. By dawn, I had a plan. It would require patience. It would require evidence. It would require allies I hadn't yet found, and moves I hadn't yet calculated. But most of all, it would require Marcus to believe his father was exactly what they claimed. Confused, incompetent, a burden waiting to be disposed of. Let them believe it. Let them file their guardianship petition. Let them schedule their court date. Let them count my Social Security as their income and reserve my bed at Pine Grove. When the time came, they would learn what 42 years of precision work had taught me. The tolerance had held. Now I had 12.4 million reasons to let it break. I approached the investigation, The way I'd approached every complex job at Thompson Aerospace. Systematically, methodically, with tolerances measured and documented. The week following my discovery at Marcus's window, I performed the role of confused old man. Each repetition more believable than the last. At breakfast, I asked about Lily's piano recital. 20 minutes later, I asked again. An hour after that, a third time. Marcus looked at Tiffany across the kitchen table. See what I mean? He's getting worse. Tiffany smiled. I noted the smile in my hidden journal that evening. November 26th. Tiffany smiled at the third repetition. Confirmation behavior. They believe the narrative. The journal lived in the deepest compartment of my puzzle box, the chamber that required 42 moves to access. No one else could open it. No one else knew it existed. Raymond Blackwood became my first ally through a phone call placed from the garage at 10 a.m. on a Tuesday, while Marcus was at work and Tiffany was at her Pilates class. I need your help. I kept my voice low, though the nearest person was half a mile away. No one can know. Raymond was quiet for a moment. Then his voice came through, measured and careful. I've seen this before, Earl. Gentle people who become predators when inheritance is involved. Tell me what you need. I told him everything. The guardianship petition, Pine Grove, the forged loan, the December 3rd hearing date. When I finished, Raymond was quiet for a long moment. Your son is in deeper trouble than he knows, he finally said. I have contacts who can help. People who specialize in exactly this situation. He gave me 3 names. Raymond connected me with Catherine Webb, a forensic handwriting analyst with 30 years of experience and a reputation for testimony that held up under the most aggressive cross-examination. She'd certified documents in cases that sent people to prison. Then there was Tom Reyes, a retired police detective who now worked as a private investigator specializing in elder financial abuse. He knew how to trace money through accounts designed to hide it. And a prosecutor in the district attorney's elder abuse unit. A woman named Sandra Chen, who was, in Raymond's words, very interested in documented cases with evidence as thorough as you're gathering. I wrote down each name, tucked the paper into Dorothy's recipe box. The evidence gathering proceeded on 2 tracks. Track 1, the forgery. I spent 3 days collecting original signature samples. Dorothy's funeral paperwork from 8 months ago. My Thompson Aerospace retirement documents from last year. Checks written over 40 years, retrieved from boxes I'd stored in the garage corner. My signature had remained consistent for 5 decades. A machinist's precise, economical script. The loops the same, the spacing the same, the pressure the same. Catherine Webb compared them to the home equity loan signature in her office on Market Street. I sat across from her desk while she examined the documents under a magnifying lamp, her gray hair pulled back, her eyes sharp behind reading glasses. 40 minutes of silence. The lamp hummed. Paper slid across the desk surface. Then she looked up. Inconsistent pressure patterns. Her voice was clinical, detached, the voice of an expert who'd said these words 100 times before. Unnatural letter spacing. Pen lifts, where the authentic signature shows continuous flow. She set down her magnifier. This is a careful imitation, Mr. Dawson, not a genuine signature. Someone studied your handwriting and tried too hard to replicate it. The effort shows in the hesitation marks. Can you testify to that in court? I can and I will. She pulled out a legal pad. I'll have my full report ready within the week. Whoever forged this document committed a felony. I thanked her, paid her retainer from the emergency fund hidden in Dorothy's recipe box, drove home with the knowledge that Track 1 was complete. Track 2. Financial exploitation. Tom Reyes was a heavy-set man in his 60s, with a gray mustache and the steady eyes of someone who'd spent 3 decades reading criminals. We met at a diner on the east side of town, a place where no one would recognize either of us. He ordered coffee and listened without interruption while I laid out what I knew. When I finished, he nodded once. I've worked cases like this before. Families bleeding their elderly dry through small withdrawals and manufactured emergencies. The pattern is always the same. Can you trace where the money went? Give me 2 weeks. He pulled out a notebook. I'll need the loan documents, your bank statements, and access to any records you can provide. I gave him everything. The forged home equity loan, the statements showing the $60,000 withdrawal, Dorothy's meticulous records from before her death. Tom called me 12 days later. You need to sit down for this. I was already sitting in my garage, on my army cot, the space heater clicking in the corner. The $60,000 from the forged loan went into your son's joint account with his wife. Tom's voice was flat, the delivery of a man presenting evidence. Within 30 days, it went out again in 5 separate transactions. Tell me. Credit card payments totaling $32,000. But here's the thing, Earl. Those cards were maxed again within 6 weeks. He was paying down debt just to run it back up. What else? A $12,000 deposit on his wife's Mercedes lease. I thought of Tiffany's silver sedan pulling into the driveway. The car that cost more than I'd spent on transportation in 10 years. Bought with money stolen from me. And $8,000 to the Meadow Ridge Country Club. Membership fees. $8,000. For the privilege of playing golf with people who'd never know their neighbor had robbed his own father to join them. Tom wasn't finished. I dug deeper into their financial situation. You're going to want to hear this. Go ahead. 12 maxed credit cards. Total balance, $180,000. The Meadow Ridge mortgage is underwater after 2 refinances. Your son borrowed against the house you helped him buy, twice. And they're 3 months behind on your granddaughter's private school tuition. I sat in silence for a long moment. The numbers assembled themselves in my mind like components on an assembly line. 12 maxed credit cards. Mortgage underwater. 3 months behind on tuition. They weren't greedy. They were drowning. They're not just greedy, I said slowly. They're desperate. Exactly. Tom's voice carried grim satisfaction. The guardianship petition makes sense now. Your Social Security, plus whatever they think you have left, represents their last chance to avoid bankruptcy. Pine Grove isn't about disposing of you. It's about survival. They need me institutionalized before creditors discover assets to seize. That's my assessment. Tom paused. I've briefed Sandra Chen at the DA's office. She's very interested in prosecuting this case. Financial exploitation of an elder. Forgery. Fraud. Your son is looking at serious time if we can prove intent. We can prove intent. I have the documentation. Then we proceed. The trust provisions became my shield, as Raymond explained during our second phone call. The spendthrift clause means Marcus can't claim the inheritance, even with guardianship. Raymond's voice was patient, precise. The money is legally untouchable by family members or creditors. What about the competency requirement? That's where my documentation comes in. I have extensive notes from our conversation in Tulsa. You discussed complex legal provisions, asked intelligent questions, demonstrated cognitive function well above average. Any guardianship petition claiming mental incapacity will have to contradict my sworn testimony. And the independent trustee, required for any transfer over $50,000. Someone who will actually verify your wishes, not a family member, not someone who could be pressured. I felt Dorothy's hand in this protection. Her letters to Clyde had prompted the inheritance. Her foresight had prompted Clyde's protective structure. Your uncle was a wildcatter, Raymond said. He knew how to protect what he found. So did your wife. I recruited witnesses who could testify to my competence. The Thursday morning, Denny's group assembled at 8 a.m. every week, the same booth in the back corner where we'd been meeting for 15 years. Harry Chen, Bill Morrison, Frank DeLuca, retired machinists, foremen, and engineers from Thompson Aerospace who remembered when American manufacturing meant precision. The booth vinyl was cracked and familiar. Coffee steam rose between us. Plates clattered somewhere behind the counter. I joined them the Thursday after meeting Tom Reyes, Earl. Harry nodded as I slid into the booth. You look like a man with something on his mind. I laid it out. The guardianship petition. The accusations of incompetence. The December 3rd hearing. Frank set down his coffee cup with more force than necessary. Incompetent? He's sharper than any engineer we ever worked with. I watched him solve a tolerance problem in his head that stumped the entire design team for 3 days. That satellite component jig in 2015. Harry nodded. The one they said couldn't be machined at that specification. I designed it at my workbench, I said. Same workbench I still use. Bill leaned forward. What do you need from us? I need you to testify. Tell the court what you've seen, what you know. 3 nods around the table. You got it. Pastor James Whitfield, who had known Earl and Dorothy for 37 years, met me in his office at First Methodist Church the following Sunday. 71 years old, white-haired, with the gentle demeanor that had shepherded our congregation for 3 decades. Earl. He rose from behind his desk. I've been worried about you since Dorothy's funeral. With good reason, I said. I told him about the guardianship petition, the lies Tiffany had spread, the plan to institutionalize me. Pastor Whitfield's face hardened in a way I'd never seen. I baptized Marcus. His voice was soft, but the words carried weight. I watched him grow up in this church. Dorothy was one of the kindest people I've ever known. He looked at me with those 37 years of history in his eyes. What she would think of this breaks my heart. I need you to testify, I said. To my competence, to my character. Earl. His hand gripped my shoulder. I would consider it an honor. Dr. Patricia Hendricks, my physician of 20 years, reviewed my medical records in her office on Oak Street while I sat in the patient chair. Not the 15-minute evaluator Marcus had found through insurance connections. Earl, your cognitive function is excellent for your age. She looked up from the chart. Blood pressure controlled. No significant memory issues. I see you for annual checkups, and you ask questions that show you're paying attention to your health. Marcus found a doctor who examined me for 15 minutes and declared me incompetent. Dr. Stephen Marsh. She said the name like it tasted sour. I know his practice. Quick evaluations for insurance purposes. Not thorough. Not ethical. Would you testify to my actual condition? I'd be happy to contradict his assessment in court. She closed the chart. Anyone who spends more than 5 minutes with you knows you're sharp as a tack. The final piece came from Dorothy's letters to Clyde. Raymond had preserved them all. Decades of correspondence documenting my life, my work, my achievements. But more than that, they documented Marcus. I read through them in my garage, the puzzle box open on my workbench, the hidden compartment revealing pages I'd never seen. Dorothy's handwriting from 2015, Earl designed a new jig for the satellite component line. The one with the beryllium copper contacts that had to seat within 2 ten-thousandths tolerance. The engineers said it couldn't be done at that specification. Earl proved them wrong in 3 days. I wish Marcus could see what his father is capable of. I wish he respected the precision, the patience, the skill. Instead, he talks about productivity podcasts and optimization strategies. Words without substance. And from 2018, I worry about Marcus. He wants so much to be important, but he confuses importance with appearance. Earl keeps giving him money we can't afford. I love our son, but I don't always like who he's becoming. There's a coldness in him now. But calculation. Tiffany encourages it. I set the letter down. My wife had seen it. Years before I did, she'd documented it in letters to a man I'd forgotten, building a record that would now help save me. The days passed. November became December. By December 1st, I had assembled everything. Forensic evidence of the forged signature, documented by Catherine Webb in a 17-page report. Financial exploitation totaling over $200,000, traced by Tom Reyes through bank records and credit card statements. Witness statements from respected community members who could testify to my competence and character. Medical testimony from Dr. Patricia Hendricks contradicting the 15-minute evaluation Marcus had arranged. And Dorothy's letters, decades of correspondence, painting a picture impossible to dismiss. The guardianship hearing was scheduled for December 3rd, 2 days away. I would attend. I would play the confused old man, shuffling into the courtroom, forgetting names, repeating questions. Let them smile at my episodes. Let them believe their narrative was unfolding exactly as planned. Then the judge would ask if I had anything to say. I would introduce Raymond Blackwood as my attorney. I would present the evidence. I would see my son's scheme collapse around him like a building with a cracked foundation. But legal victory wasn't enough. I sat in my garage the evening before the hearing, evidence assembled and ready. The puzzle box lay open on my workbench. Dorothy's letters spread across the surface. Evidence of a son who had become a stranger. Something more than court documents and witness testimony. Marcus needed to understand what he had done. A moment where my son looked into his father's eyes and saw not a burden to be disposed of, but the man who had built everything he was destroying. A reckoning. The Thanksgiving dinner would provide it. I picked up my phone and dialed Marcus's number. He answered on the third ring. "Dad, everything okay?" "I'm fine." I let my voice waver slightly, the confused old man they expected. "I was thinking about the holiday." "What about it?" "I'd like to eat with the family this year. Just this once." Silence on the line. I could almost hear Marcus calculating. The guardianship hearing was 9 days away. They'd already won, in their minds. What harm could one dinner do? They could afford to be generous to a man who would be in Pine Grove by January. "Sure, Dad." His voice brightened with false warmth. "We'd love that. Could we invite Pastor Whitfield? He's been so kind since Dorothy passed." Marcus hesitated. "I suppose. And my old friend Raymond from Tulsa. He's driving through for the holiday." Marcus didn't recognize the name, just as I'd planned. "Sure. Whoever you want, Dad." "Thank you, son." I hung up the phone and looked at Dorothy's recipe box. The hidden compartment held evidence that would destroy my son's life. The legal documents, the forged signature analysis, the financial records, but also her letters, her words, her love reaching across death to save me one more time. Thanksgiving was in 4 days. The reckoning was coming. I chose Thanksgiving for the confrontation. The anniversary of my first meal alone in the garage. The holiday that marked when I stopped being family and became furniture. 8 months of exclusion. 1 Thanksgiving of eating a turkey sandwich while laughter came through the walls. 1 holiday of being told Dad gets confused with too many people. This year would end differently. 3 days before, I called Marcus from the garage. 10 in the morning. Tiffany at her Pilates class, the space heater clicking in the corner. Thermostat stuck at 52 degrees. Marcus answered on the second ring. "Dad, everything okay?" I let my voice waver, the confused old man they expected. The broken father making a final plea. "I'm fine. I was thinking about the holiday." "What about it?" "I'd like to eat with the family this year. Just this once." The line went quiet. I heard him breathing, calculating. The guardianship hearing was 9 days away. They'd already won in their minds. Pine Grove had a bed reserved. Dr. Marsh's evaluation sat in a filing cabinet somewhere, ready to declare me incompetent. What harm could one dinner do? Sure, Dad. His voice brightened with false warmth. We'd love that. Could we invite Pastor Whitfield? He's been so kind since Dorothy passed. Marcus hesitated, a minister at the table. Moral authority, witness, I suppose? And my old friend Raymond from Tulsa. He's driving through for the holiday. Marcus didn't ask who Raymond was. Good. Raymond Blackwood, estate attorney. The man who held $12.4 million in legal documents and could verify my competence with sworn testimony. Sure. Whoever you want, Dad. Dad, thank you, son. I hung up and looked at Dorothy's recipe box on the milk crate nightstand. The hidden compartment held everything I needed. The forged signature analysis, the bank records, the evidence that would end my son's scheme and possibly send him to prison. But I needed witnesses, people who knew me, people who could testify to what they saw. I called Harry Chen first, Earl. His voice carried 40 years of factory floors and precision work. What's going on? I need you at Thanksgiving dinner. Marcus's house. I might need witnesses for something important. Harry didn't ask what. Didn't need to. When a man you've worked beside for 4 decades asks for witnesses, you show up. I'll be there. Bill Morrison said the same thing. So did Frank DeLuca. 3 machinists who'd seen me solve problems in my head that stumped entire engineering teams. 3 men who could testify that the confused old man forgetting his water glass had designed satellite components to tolerances measured in 10,000ths of an inch. Harry, Bill, and Frank had come without question when I called, same as they always had. By Thanksgiving morning, the guest list had grown to 12 people. Only 3 of them were on Marcus's side. The dining room looked different when you were allowed to see it from inside. Cream walls with crown molding. A chandelier Tiffany had insisted on, crystal drops catching the November light. The table was set with the good china, white plates with gold rims that had been a wedding gift from Dorothy and me 8 years ago. Another gift that became another expectation. I stood in the doorway for a moment, taking it in. The family photos on the wall conspicuously missing me. The Thanksgiving decorations Tiffany had arranged with careful attention to Instagram aesthetics. The place settings around the table. 12 chairs where there had only ever been 11 before. They'd added a seat for me, the confused old man. The burden they could afford to be generous to for one more meal. I took my place between Harry Chen and Pastor Whitfield. Raymond Blackwood sat across from me, the manila folder tucked beside his chair where no one could see it. The turkey smelled like the ones Dorothy used to make, but wrong somehow. Too much rosemary. Silverware clinked against china. Someone's chair scraped against the hardwood. Dinner proceeded through turkey and small talk. I performed confusion the way I'd once performed satisfaction, when a foreman asked about a problem I'd already solved. Lily has a piano recital next week, doesn't she? I asked Tiffany, my voice uncertain. She looked at me with that tight smile. We talked about this 20 minutes ago, Earl. It was last week. I blinked slowly, nodded, let my face go slack with manufactured bewilderment. 20 minutes later, I asked again. When is Lily's recital? Marcus looked at Tiffany. Tiffany looked at Marcus. Their eyes said everything. Getting worse every day. I knocked over my water glass, reaching for bread. The liquid spread across the tablecloth, while Tiffany rushed to contain the damage with napkins. My hands shook convincingly as I apologized. I'm sorry. I don't know what's wrong with me today. It's fine, Dad. Marcus's voice carried the patience of a man already counting the days until Pine Grove. Harry Chen watched me fumble with my fork. Bill Morrison studied his plate. Frank DeLuca's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. They knew. They'd seen me work with tools that required steady hands and perfect precision. They knew this performance was exactly that. Pastor Whitfield said little, his white hair catching the chandelier light. A minister preparing to testify about character. Raymond Blackwood waited. Marcus relaxed into confidence as the meal progressed. He told stories about work, about crushing it with a new client, about the productivity podcast that was really transforming his approach to business. Optimize your environment, he said, gesturing with his fork. Remove friction from your daily routine. That's what the experts say. He didn't notice his colleagues exchanging glances. Didn't see the way Raymond's fingers rested on the folder beside his chair. Tiffany's smile grew sharper with each of my episodes. Confirmation, documentation, evidence for the hearing in 9 days. I could see her mentally filing away each fumbled moment, the water glass, the repeated questions, the way I couldn't remember Raymond's name when he passed me the gravy boat. Thank you. I paused, squinting at him. I'm sorry, what was your name again? Raymond. His voice was warm, patient, from Tulsa. Right. I let confusion wash across my face. Tulsa. Tiffany's eyes met Marcus's across the table. This was even better than they'd hoped. Witnesses to the incompetence. A room full of people watching Earl Dawson fall apart. The moment came during dessert. Marcus was explaining his vision for optimizing the family's financial situation, his voice carrying the self-assured cadence of a man who'd listened to too many podcasts and understood none of them. The thing about wealth management, he said, is that you need to think long-term. Consolidate assets. Streamline the portfolio. I set down my fork. I received some documents recently. My voice was clear now. Steady. The confused old man vanished between one breath and the next. About Uncle Clyde's estate. Marcus's face flickered. Recognition. Confusion. Something shifting behind his eyes. Tiffany's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. Her eyes narrowed, then widened. Her hand moved toward her purse. Raymond here is the estate attorney. I nodded across the table. He can explain better than I can. Raymond stood. He unfolded his reading glasses with deliberate slowness, the gesture of a man who delivered difficult news 1,000 times. He produced the manila folder from beside his chair. The table went silent. Clyde Dawson left his entire estate to Earl. Raymond's voice filled the room. 3 producing oil wells, generating $47,000 monthly in royalties. A 400-acre ranch in Osage County. Mineral rights extending 200 feet below the surface. He paused. Total estimated value, $12.4 million. The silence stretched. No one breathed. Marcus's mouth opened, closed, opened again. That's... His voice came out rough. That's wonderful. Dad, that's great news. He recovered faster than I expected. The opportunism surfacing through the shock. We should talk about how to manage. We should talk about something else first. I cut him off. Quiet. Precise. The voice of a man who'd spent 42 years measuring tolerances in 10,000ths of an inch. Raymond, please show them page 7 of the trust document. The spendthrift clause. Raymond turned pages. Read aloud. The trust includes a spendthrift provision, preventing any creditor, family member, or legal guardian from accessing, redirecting, or encumbering the principal or income of this trust. An independent trustee must approve any transfer exceeding $50,000. The beneficiary's competence at acceptance has been verified and documented. He looked up from the page. Your father accepted this inheritance in my office 3 weeks ago. I have extensive notes on our conversation. He discussed complex legal provisions, asked intelligent questions, and demonstrated cognitive function well above average. Raymond's eyes moved to Marcus, then to Tiffany. He is not, by any medical or legal standard, incompetent. I produced the second folder. Tom Reyes had assembled it over 2 weeks. Financial records, bank statements, the forensic handwriting analysis, every piece of evidence I'd gathered while playing the confused old man. I know about the guardianship petition. I set the folder on the table. I know about Pine Grove. Marcus went pale. The color drained from his face like water from a sink. I know about the $60,000 home equity loan you forged my signature on, Marcus. I have the forensic analysis. I spread documents across the Thanksgiving table. The original signature samples from Dorothy's funeral paperwork. Catherine Webb's 17-page expert report. Bank records showing exactly where every stolen dollar went. The signature shows inconsistent pressure patterns. I read from the report, unnatural letter spacing. Pen lifts, where the authentic signature shows continuous flow. A careful imitation, not a genuine signature. Dad, Marcus started. I know about your $180,000 in credit card debt. His mouth snapped shut. I know you're 3 months behind on Lily's tuition. I know you borrowed against the house twice. I know the credit card payments from that forged loan were maxed again within 6 weeks. Marcus was sweating now. Dark patches spreading beneath his arms on his golf shirt. His hands gripped the edge of the table. Tiffany stood suddenly. Her chair scraped against the hardwood floor. She reached for her purse. Sit down. The words came out quiet. She froze. These documents are going to the district attorney's elder abuse unit on Monday morning. Tom Reyes, retired detective, has already briefed them. Forgery. Financial exploitation of an elder. Criminal charges, carrying up to 10 years. Pastor Whitfield spoke into the silence. His voice heavy with 37 years of history, with sorrow. Marcus, he looked at my son. I baptized you. I watched you sing in the children's choir at 7 years old. Your mother was so proud. He paused. What she would think of this breaks my heart. Marcus broke. Dad, I'm sorry. The words came rushing out. I didn't mean it was Tiffany's idea, she said we needed. Don't you dare. Tiffany's voice cut like broken glass. She turned on him, with the speed of an alliance shattering in real time. You approached me about the guardianship. You found Dr. Marsh. You signed the papers. You picked Pine Grove. Marcus's voice rose. You researched the facility, because you couldn't afford. My colleagues watched in silence. 3 machinists who'd seen corporate betrayals, who recognized the moment when the guilty turned on each other. I'm not done. My voice cut through their recriminations. The guardianship hearing is in 9 days. You will withdraw the petition. Dad, you will terminate Dr. Marsh's fraudulent evaluation. You will vacate this house by January 1st. Marcus stared at me. This house? My money bought it. The down payment, the co-signed mortgage, the loans you called temporary that were never repaid. You can't just... Raymond stepped forward. He can. The trust provisions include substantial legal resources for exactly this situation. Earl has already retained family counsel. Given the documented abuse and exploitation, any court will favor his position. I wasn't finished, and you will agree to my custody of Lily. Marcus's face twisted. Lily? She deserves better than parents who see her as a prop for social media. Tiffany's ice blue eyes went wide. Her composure broke, mouth trembling, eyes wet. You can't take my daughter. The documentation shows neglect. Raymond's voice was calm, factual, overscheduling to the point of exhaustion, emotional isolation. Months where the only adult paying meaningful attention to that child was the grandfather you planned to institutionalize. I looked at my son, really looked. searching for the boy I'd raised. The child I'd held in the delivery room 40 years ago, red-faced and screaming, fitting in my 2 hands. The teenager I'd worked doubles for, missing his baseball games so he could attend a school that cost more than I made in 3 months. I found only a stranger. You had everything. My voice was quiet now. Everything Dorothy and I could give. And it wasn't enough. Marcus's eyes glistened. For the first time in 4 years, I saw regret, shame. Dad, it was never going to be enough. Because you never learned that enough isn't about what you have. It's about who you are. I stood. The chair scraped against the hardwood. The sound was final. I looked around the table one last time, at Harry Chen and Bill Morrison and Frank DeLuca, who had come without question when I asked for witnesses. At Pastor Whitfield, who would testify to my character and my son's collapse. At Raymond Blackwood, who had delivered the truth with the steady precision of a man who'd done it 1,000 times. At Tiffany, frozen with her purse in her hands, her scheme in ruins around her. At Marcus, sweating and pale, watching his life unravel thread by thread. Dinner's over. I turned toward the door. I'll be in my garage. I have brass hinges to fit. I walked out of the dining room, through the kitchen, with its granite counters and stainless appliances, past the family photos that had never included me, through the side door that led to the converted garage where I'd spent 8 months sleeping on an army cot in 50-degree cold. The space heater clicked in the corner. 52 degrees, same as always. But I wasn't cold anymore. Dorothy's recipe box sat on the milk crate nightstand. My workbench waited in the corner. The puzzle box for Lily's birthday half-assembled, brass hinges ready to be fitted. Behind me, I could hear raised voices. Marcus and Tiffany still turning on each other. The sound of a family imploding. I sat down at my workbench, picked up the brass hinges, and got back to work. The Monday after Thanksgiving, I kept my promise. Tom Reyes walked into the district attorney's office on Maple Street at 9 in the morning, carrying a manila folder thick enough to require both hands. I waited in his sedan across the street, watching through the windshield as he disappeared through the glass doors. The building was newer than I expected. Clean lines. Government efficiency. The kind of place where paperwork became consequences. Tom had briefed me on what would happen inside. Assistant District Attorney Michelle Sanchez ran the Elder Abuse Unit. 15 years prosecuting cases like mine. She'd seen the documentation already, reviewed it over the weekend after Tom's initial contact. Now she would see the originals. I sat in that sedan for 47 minutes. The heater ticked, the November cold pressed against the windows. I counted the seconds, the way I'd counted every indignity for the past 2 years. At 9:47, Tom emerged. He crossed the street with the measured stride of a man who'd delivered evidence 1,000 times before. He opened the driver's door and slid behind the wheel. "She's opening an investigation." His voice was flat, professional. "Grand jury convenes next week." I nodded. Tom started the engine. "Your son is going to have a very bad Christmas, Earl." I looked at the building where my documentation had become a case file. 17 pages of forged signature analysis from Catherine Webb, the forensic handwriting expert Raymond had connected me with. Bank records tracing $60,000. Witness statements from men who'd worked beside me for 40 years. Dorothy would have understood. 7 days later, Marcus received notice. I wasn't there when the letter arrived. Didn't need to be. Raymond Blackwood called me that evening with the news. His voice carried the weight of a man who'd seen this play out before. Grand jury proceedings scheduled for January 8th. Your son has been notified. I sat in my garage, the space heater clicking in the corner, Dorothy's recipe box on the milk crate nightstand. Thank you, Raymond. There's more. His voice shifted. My colleagues in civil litigation filed this morning. Recovery action for the fraudulent loan and all subsequent transfers. Total claim, $214,000. The number hung in the air, $214,000. Every down payment, every loan that was never repaid. Every dollar I'd scraped together while working, doubles, and missing baseball games. What happens now? Judgment attaches to his primary asset, the house I'd helped him buy. The house where I'd slept in an unfinished garage while my son planned to warehouse me in a 2-star nursing facility. The mortgage company will be notified, Raymond continued. Given the litigation, they'll likely call in the loan. And if he can't refinance, Raymond set down his pen. With his credit history, no bank will touch him. The house fell in December. I watched from across the street as the real estate sign went up. Red and white, for sale. The lawn Marcus and Tiffany had maintained with such care now displayed evidence of their collapse. Tom Reyes, the retired detective who'd traced every stolen dollar through their accounts, brought me the details over coffee at the diner on the east side. Sold for $320,000. He set down his cup. They owed $400, plus your civil judgment attached to the proceeds. So they walk away with nothing. Less than nothing. Tom's expression was grim. The difference comes out of whatever assets remain. Joint accounts. Vehicles. Anything not protected by exemption. I thought about Tiffany's silver Mercedes. The car that cost more than I'd spent on transportation in a decade. The car bought with money stolen from Dorothy and me. They're moving into an apartment next week. Tom flipped open his notebook. 2 bedrooms, east side of town. The address is in a neighborhood where the Hendersons would never set foot. The Hendersons, whose landscaping Tiffany had mocked at cocktail parties. The Hendersons, who declined to return her calls now that the Dawson name meant fraud in Meadow Ridge. What about Marcus's job? Tom closed the notebook. That's the interesting part. The termination letter arrived at Marcus's new apartment on January 15th. I know because Tom had contacts everywhere. Insurance adjusters talked to insurance adjusters. Word spread through the professional network like current through copper wire. Conduct unbecoming. The formal language disguised the real reason. Pending criminal charges. Employer liability. The risk of having a suspected felon process claims. Marcus had spent 8 years at that company. 8 years of modest performance and productivity podcasts. 8 years of optimizing his environment and crushing it with new clients. Gone in a single letter. His insurance adjuster license followed 2 weeks later. Suspended pending investigation. The regulatory board didn't wait for conviction. The documentation alone was enough. I thought about all those podcasts he'd listened to. The self-improvement courses he'd never completed. The business gurus he'd quoted while stealing from his own father. None of them had a strategy for catastrophic failure. Tiffany filed for divorce in February. The papers landed on Marcus's desk at the apartment, the one without granite counters or stainless appliances. Tom showed me a copy of the filing. Irreconcilable differences. The legal language covered what the gossip network already knew. She was cutting her losses. The custody petition came with it. Full custody of Lily, on grounds that Marcus's criminal situation made him an unfit parent. I read that paragraph 3 times. She's claiming he's unfit, I said to Raymond over the phone, to raise his own daughter. Raymond's voice was careful. She's positioning herself as the stable parent, distancing from the charges. She was in on everything. She was careful. Raymond's tone carried a lawyer's precision. She let Marcus sign the documents, kept her fingerprints off the forgeries. Criminally, she's clean, but not civilly. No. The judgment attaches to marital assets, joint accounts, shared credit cards. She'll walk away from this marriage with nothing but what she can exempt. I thought about Tiffany's silver Mercedes, the country club membership. The designer labels one tax bracket above their actual income. All of it built on money stolen from me. I filed my own custody petition in March. Raymond had prepared the documentation. Months of evidence. Lily's overscheduled exhaustion, her emotional isolation, the months she'd spent seeking refuge in my garage, while her parents planned to institutionalize the only adult who paid attention to her. My attorney, Patricia Holloway, a woman who specialized in family law and had handled cases like this for 20 years, walked me through the strategy. Both parents have documented neglect. She spread photographs across her desk. Tiffany enrolled Lily in 4 activities for social currency, not the child's benefit. Marcus was so absorbed in his schemes, he barely spent time with her. And me? You're the one constant positive presence in that girl's life. Patricia looked up. Teachers noticed her exhaustion. The court-appointed psychologist found she expresses consistent preference for you. She wants to live with me? She wants someone who sees her. Patricia closed the folder. Not as a prop, not as an accessory. As a child. I sat in that office thinking about Lily watching me fit brass hinges. About her questions no one else thought to ask. But the birthday puzzle box, waiting on my workbench, 23 hidden compartments for a girl who deserved better than parents who saw her as currency. The criminal trial convened in April. The courtroom smelled of floor polish and old wood. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The kind of institutional space where consequences became official. Marcus sat at the defendant's table in a suit that didn't fit as well as it used to. He'd lost weight. The stress showed in the hollows of his cheeks, the shadows under his eyes. Tiffany wasn't there. She'd made that clear in the divorce proceedings. She was done with Marcus Dawson. I took the witness stand at 10,000ths on a Tuesday morning. The wooden chair was hard beneath me, the microphone cold against my chin. The prosecutor, a younger woman who worked under a D.A. Sanchez, walked me through the testimony. Dates, amounts, exact quotes. I answered with the precision of a man who'd spent 42 years measuring tolerances in 10,000ths of an inch. Tell us about the home equity loan, Mr. Dawson. I looked at the jury. 12 faces. 12 strangers who would decide my son's fate. In September of 2023, my son asked me to sign what he called routine insurance documents. I signed where he pointed. 6 weeks later, I discovered a $60,000 home equity loan had been taken against my house. The signature on that loan was not mine. How do you know it wasn't your signature? I've signed my name the same way for 50 years. The loops are consistent. The spacing is consistent. The pressure is consistent. The signature on that loan showed hesitation marks. Pen lifts where my hand would flow continuously. Someone studied my signature and tried too hard to copy it. The defense attorney objected. Speculation. The judge overruled. We have expert testimony on this point. Catherine Webb took the stand after me. 17 pages of forensic analysis reduced to clear, clinical language. Inconsistent pressure patterns. Unnatural letter spacing. Pen lifts where the authentic signature shows continuous flow. This is a careful imitation, not a genuine signature. Tom Reyes traced the money. Every dollar of the $60,000 accounted for. Credit card payments that were maxed again within weeks. A $12,000 deposit on a Mercedes lease. $8,000 to the Meadow Ridge Country Club. Pastor James Whitfield, who had known Dorothy and me for 37 years, testified to my mental acuity. 37 years of history compressed into 15 minutes. I've known Earl Dawson since before his son was born. He served as a deacon in our church for 2 decades. His mind is as sharp as anyone I know. And his son? The prosecutor asked. Pastor Whitfield's face carried the weight of what he was about to say. Marcus attended church when he needed donations for a project. Otherwise, the pew stayed empty. Dr. Patricia Hendricks, my physician of 20 years, demolished Dr. Marsh's 15-minute evaluation with detailed records of annual checkups and coherent conversations about health management. Mr. Dawson's cognitive function is excellent for his age. He asks informed questions. He tracks his medications without assistance. He manages his own affairs with precision. The defense argued coercion, misunderstanding, a family dispute taken too far. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. I sat in the gallery during those hours, counting the minutes the way I'd counted every indignity, watching the door where the verdict would emerge. My hands rested on my knees, steady as they'd been at the witness stand. At 4:23 in the afternoon, the jury returned. The foreman, a middle-aged man in a gray suit, stood and read from the paper in his hands. On the count of elder financial abuse, we find the defendant guilty. Marcus didn't move. On the count of forgery, we find the defendant guilty. His shoulders dropped an inch. On the count of fraud, we find the defendant guilty. 3 counts. 3 convictions. The schemer caught in the machinery of consequences he built for me. Sentencing came 6 weeks later. I wasn't required to attend. I went anyway. The judge, a woman in her 60s with gray hair and glasses, reviewed the case file before speaking. "Mr. Dawson," her voice carried through the courtroom, "you exploited your own father, a man who sacrificed his career advancement, his retirement savings, and his dignity to give you opportunities he never had. You forged his signature. You stole his money. You planned to have him declared incompetent and institutionalized so you could continue exploiting him." Marcus stood at the defendant's table, his attorney beside him, his future about to be pronounced. Sentencing guidelines for these offenses indicate 3 to 5 years. The judge set down the file. "Given the betrayal of familial trust and the vulnerability of the victim, I sentence you to 4 years in state prison with possibility of parole after 2. 4 years. The bailiffs approached Marcus. Handcuffs clicked around his wrists. He looked back at me as they led him away. Our eyes met across the courtroom. I saw recognition in his face. Regret. Something that might have been shame. I nodded once. Then my son disappeared through the side door, and the courtroom returned to its ordinary business. Tiffany's divorce was finalized in May. The civil judgment against Marcus attached to their joint accounts, their shared credit cards, everything not protected by exemption. The settlement left her with nothing but the Mercedes she'd leased, with stolen money. The repossession came in March, 2 months before the divorce was final. She'd missed 3 payments. The leasing company didn't care about her circumstances. Tom brought me the update over coffee. She moved back to her mother's house. He stirred sugar into his cup. Neighboring state, the same house she grew up in. The status climbing that had driven her for years had returned her to where she started. A woman who confused importance with appearance, watching it all evaporate. I thought about the country club membership, the designer labels, the Hendersons and the Costellos, and all the right circles she'd wanted to join. Gone. Lily's custody hearing lasted 3 days. The family court judge reviewed evidence from both sides. Tiffany's attorney argued stability, continuity, maternal bond. My attorney presented documentation of neglect, overscheduling, emotional isolation. A child seeking refuge with the grandfather her parents had planned to institutionalize. The court-appointed psychologist testified on the second day. Lily expresses consistent preference for her grandfather. She describes him as the only adult who listens to her, who sees her, who asks questions about what she wants instead of what would make her parents look good. Teachers from Lily's school testified on the third day. They'd noticed her exhaustion, her withdrawal. the way she brightened when she talked about weekends with her grandfather before the visits were forbidden. Pastor Whitfield spoke about character, about the man I'd been for 37 years, about the love Dorothy and I had shared and the legacy we'd tried to pass on. In May, the judge issued his ruling. Custody of Lily Dawson is hereby granted to Earl Dawson. The evidence before this court demonstrates that Mr. Dawson has been the primary positive presence in this child's life for years. Both biological parents have documented patterns of neglect, prioritizing their own interests over their daughter's well-being. Tiffany received supervised visitation, twice, monthly, monitored by a court-appointed social worker. Marcus would have visitation rights when he was released. If he could demonstrate rehabilitation, if he could prove he'd become someone worth knowing. That was 2 years away. The Meadow Ridge house sold to a young couple with 2 children. I drove past it once in June and saw new curtains in the windows, a swing set in the backyard, the kind of family that would fill those rooms with something other than schemes. Everything Marcus and Tiffany had built was gone. The status, the security, the sense of being important that had driven their every decision. The house in the aspirational subdivision, the country club membership, the professional reputation, the marriage, all of it constructed on a foundation they considered disposable. When that foundation proved otherwise, their entire structure collapsed. I sat in my garage the evening after the custody ruling, the space heater clicking in the corner, Dorothy's recipe box on the milk crate nightstand. The puzzle box for Lily's birthday waited on my workbench. Brass hinges fitted, mechanism assembled. 23 hidden compartments ready to challenge her for years. She would live with me now. In Oklahoma, on Uncle Clyde's ranch, where the oil derricks nodded against the sunrise and the grassland rolled toward horizons her parents had never shown her. I picked up my tools and began the final adjustments. Dorothy would have understood. She always did. Loving this so far? Smash like and rate my story from 1 to 10 in the comments. Thank you for being here. 5 months after the custody ruling, Lily and I moved into Uncle Clyde's ranch house in Osage County. The house was built in 1962. Wood-paneled walls, low ceilings, the kind of place a wildcatter would build when he struck it rich but couldn't shake the habits of growing up poor. Small rooms filled with photographs of family Lily had never met, cousins she'd never know. An uncle I'd forgotten existed until Dorothy's letters brought him back. The spare bedroom became my workshop. I set up the lathe Tom helped me transport from Missouri, hung my tools on pegboard the way I'd arranged them for 40 years. Dorothy's recipe box finally got a proper home on the shelf above the workbench, where I could see it while I carved. After 18 months on a milk crate in that garage, she deserved better. Lily took to Oklahoma like she'd been born to it. The local elementary school had 23 kids in her grade. Nobody cared about country club memberships or competitive swimming schedules. Her new friends wanted to know if she could ride horses, if she'd ever seen an oil derrick up close, if her grandfather was really the man who'd built puzzle boxes for 40 years. She learned to ride that first month. The ranch manager's daughter, a girl named Sarah who was 10 and fearless, taught her on a quarter horse named Dusty. I watched from the porch while Lily circled the paddock, her face bright with something I hadn't seen in years. She laughed out loud. I hadn't heard that sound in years. Sundays, we drove to First Methodist in Ponca City. Different church, same denomination, same wooden pews and familiar hymns that had anchored me for decades. Pastor Whitfield made the drive from Texas twice that summer to see us settled. He sat in my kitchen drinking coffee, looking out at the grassland rolling toward the horizon. "She's thriving, Earl." His voice carried satisfaction. "I know. Dorothy would be proud." I looked at the recipe box on my workshop shelf, the hidden compartment where she'd kept her letters to Clyde. The correspondence that saved my life. She always did the hard work, I said. I just showed up. My colleagues from Thompson made the drive every few months. Harry Chem, Bill Morrison, Frank DeLuca. They'd pull into the gravel driveway in Harry's old Ford pickup. 3 retired machinists with bad knees and good stories. Lily would pull up a chair before they finished parking, her questions ready. She'd sit at the kitchen table while they told her about her grandfather. The satellite component jig he designed in 3 days. The tolerance problems he solved in his head. The reputation he built over 42 years of precision work. Grandpa really did all that? She looked at me with new eyes after those stories. I really did. The puzzle box for her 9th birthday was my most complex design yet. 23 hidden compartments. Sequential locks requiring 42 moves to reach the deepest chamber. Brass hinges fitted to tolerances measured in thousandths of an inch. The mechanism would take her years to master. 42 moves to the center. Same as the years I'd worked. The royalties from Clyde's oil wells deposited $47,000 each month. More than I'd earned in a year at Thompson. I set up a trust for Lily's education, managed by professionals Raymond recommended, with provisions Dorothy would have approved. College, trade school, whatever she wanted when the time came. For myself, I kept things simple. Same flannel shirts. Same polished boots. Sunday morning cinnamon rolls made from Dorothy's recipe, the one with the handwritten adjustments in her careful script. A little less sugar, a little more cinnamon, the way she liked them. November came with shorter days and longer shadows. I sat on the front porch one evening, watching the sunset paint the Oklahoma sky. Orange and pink and colors I didn't have names for. The oil derricks nodded in the distance, their steady rhythm like a heartbeat. The air smelled of dust and grass, and something faintly mineral from the wells. Lily came through the screen door, the birthday puzzle box in her hands. She'd been working on it for months, solving one compartment at a time, her patience growing with each discovery. Grandpa. She climbed into the chair beside me. I found another compartment. There's a letter inside. I looked at the box. At the deepest chamber, the one that required 42 moves to access. She'd solved it. I'd hidden Dorothy's letter there. One of the pages she'd written to Clyde, explaining why family mattered. Why patience was strength. Why love meant showing up even when it hurt. Read it to me, I said. Lily unfolded the paper. Her voice carried Dorothy's words across the evening air, her grandmother's handwriting translated into sound. Family isn't about blood, Lily read. It's about who shows up, who stays, who does the hard work when no one's watching. Earl taught me that. 40 years of showing up. 40 years of staying. I hope you remember that, Clyde. I hope you remember him. Lily looked up. Grandma wrote this? She wrote a lot of things. To a man I'd forgotten, because she never forgot what mattered. Lily folded the letter and placed it back in the compartment. The sunset faded toward purple. The oil derricks kept their rhythm. Are you happy, Grandpa? I thought about the question. About Dorothy, still gone. About Marcus, still lost. About the years of sacrifice that couldn't be recovered. And the garage where I'd slept on an army cot in 50-degree cold. I'm at peace. She leaned against my shoulder, the way she used to in the garage, before Tiffany forbade the visits. Before everything fell apart. That's good, Grandpa. I wrapped my arm around her. This quiet child, who'd been overscheduled into exhaustion and neglected into silence. This granddaughter, who deserved better than parents, who saw her as currency. She had better now. We sat there until the stars came out. The Oklahoma sky stretched overhead, wider than any sky I'd seen in 64 years. The pump jacks nodded against the dark, red lights blinking at their tips. The coyotes called in the distance. Dorothy's recipe box waited on my workshop shelf. Her letters had saved me. Her love had reached across death to build this life. 42 years of holding tolerances. This porch, this girl, this sky.